It's Overnight America. Thanks for all your calls there, and I'm sure we can pick some of this up later in the show. But joining us now is a senior partner at Pure O'Connor and Strauss, and also a guardianship expert, Peter Strauss. Thank you for coming on to KMOX.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
I think a lot of people have started to learn a little bit about guardianship as a legal aspect when it comes to parents and their children when they become adults, conservatorship and things because of Britney Spears. And there's a documentary that's coming out, and I know a lot of people have been talking about this case online too. I gotta, to me, I am completely out of the loop. I know almost nothing about it. I don't know how rare this is. Maybe you can kind of give me a background of, because I'm sure a lot of people have asked you about it, maybe an uptick of people asking you about it, maybe a background on what might be going on with the whole Britney Spears case.
Well, the Britney Spears case has certainly made people aware of the issue of guardianship, what it is, and the negatives and positives about it. Essentially, guardianship is a process whereby state by state, with different rules in each state, a family member or a government agency such as Adult Protective Services feels that a person, whether a minor, someone in the middle years, or a senior citizen, is not functioning well, is not able to make wise decisions, and seeks to have someone appointed to essentially take over that person's life. And depending on the state, that is called a guardianship proceeding or a conservatorship proceeding. Essentially, they're the same things. And the rules do vary very much state by state. Essentially, what's happening is the state or the family, in its role of seeking to be in parenti, being a parent and intervening, takes away a lot of the freedom of a person to act. And depending on the court order appointing the guardian, rights of a person who is found to be incapacitated, that's the modern word. We don't usually say incompetent anymore. Incapacitated is the more modern term, meaning that they can't either manage their finances, they're subject to financial abuse, or they're not paying their bills, they may be evicted, or make healthcare decisions. So if a person is not able to express their wishes, or because of their health, they can't actually make healthcare decisions, the court, after holding a hearing, will appoint someone to be the guardian. And depending on what the court order says, that guardian will be given a certain amount of powers. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a New Yorker, and I don't know a lot about the Britney Spears case, but apparently in 2008, her father, Jamie, filed a petition with the court saying that Britney Spears was not functioning. She was making bad decisions. She'd had a couple of psychiatric episodes, and he asked the court to appoint him to be her conservator, and essentially all of her rights to manage her finances, make financial decisions, make personal decisions about where she was going to live, were given to her father as conservator. That's rough, and it's not something that any one of us would like to have happen to us, but it does happen in a fair number of cases. And depending on the state, there are protections to a greater degree or a less degree to see that that doesn't happen, or if it does happen, the minimum powers and rights are taken away from a person. Wow. But it's tricky, and it's something we want to avoid.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's against the will, and there's a lot of people looking at this and saying this is a messed up process, all things considered, because, she's working, she's definitely got enough resources in order to take care of herself and her basic needs, but she's making well above that. She's able to get to the point where she's even doing concerts and television shows and stuff like that. So that would indicate that there might not be a need for this sort of thing. She's got it together. Maybe that he disagrees with how she's living her life or whatever, may be one thing. So it makes me wonder, what does a judge take into consideration to make such a call on a case like that?
It's very hard to understand why that in 2020, apparently, from what I've read, There were several motions to end the conservatorship, and those motions were rejected several times by the judge handling the case. So I'm really at a loss also. But again, I'm far away and I'm not familiar with the details. And until you get into the weeds and really read the court record and hear the testimony, it's hard to, from afar, make a determination of whether a judge is acting properly or not. But again, it comes down to the balancing between what I call autonomy and paternalism. People have a right to make bad decisions as long as they have the capacity to make those decisions and understand the consequences. We shouldn't be imposing our view of what's a proper lifestyle on someone else because we don't like the way they live. If that's what they want and they have the capacity to function, they can make bad decisions. Very briefly, I'll tell you about a case in New York a number of years ago. A woman had a gangrenous leg, and the doctor said to her, if we don't amputate, you're going to die. And she said, no, I don't want to live without a leg. She was in her late 70s. Well, they brought an application to have a guardian appointed to force her to have the amputation. And the judge held a hearing, listened to her, heard her story that she understood the risks that she would die. And it was probable that she would. Yet she said no. And the judge ruled in her favor because he found she understood that she had the capacity to make that decision, even if he would have made another decision, even if you and I would have made a different decision. Yeah. And that's where we need to draw the line. And I can't judge whether in California they did this correctly, but people need to understand that. And they can prevent the guardianship in many ways, including having advance directives. People must have a healthcare proxy where they name a trusted friend or family member to make the decisions that they would want about their health care if there comes a time when they can't make their own decisions. Otherwise, the default is someone gets to be your guardian, and it might be your parent, it might be your sibling, it might be your spouse, but it could be a stranger. Could be me.
Wow.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I know. It could be the lady at the DMV, and I don't think anyone wants that. But
Right.
I think when you talk about guardianship, you mentioned some examples at the very start of the interview. By default, is a parent automatically a guardianship over their kids, or is that not? I mean, sometimes do parents of minors have to go to the court for something like this?
Well, they can, but for many decisions, a parent up to the age of 18, there may be a few states where it's still 21, but it's usually 18 now. You become a non-minor, an adult when you're 18. Mm-hmm. The parents have certain natural rights. They are the natural guardian. But for example, if you've got a 14-year-old son and grandma leaves that son, $10,000, the son is not legally capable. Practically, he or she might be. The son, of course, is a he. But you'd have to appoint a guardian of a minor to take in that $10,000 and open a bank account. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have guardianships of minors in New York and other states just so they can technically given the power to hold that money. But once you're 18, you either make your own decisions or you appoint someone in a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney, or you create a trust to make decisions for you, manage your property. In our firm, we talk about future planning. It's not just what you do with your money when you die. That's what a will does. It's how your assets and your healthcare decision-making is going to be made while you're alive if there comes a time when you're not able to make your own decisions. And it's better that we, through these advance directives, choose the people that we want to represent us and think for us and decide for us, rather than leaving it to the default process, which is the guardianship courts. Mm-hmm. They're slow. There's a lack of privacy. It's something we want to avoid, and people can avoid that if they talk to a competent trust and estates or elder law attorney, which is what we do in our firm. to help people plan for the problems of life. Life happens, and sometimes there could be bad things.
Yeah. Peter Strauss is the senior partner at Pierre O'Connor and Strauss, a guardianship expert. And just one other question: when it comes to a breakdown, do you find that it's 90% of the time it's maybe a kid with an elderly parent, or is it more common to see a parent with a younger child, kind of like we're seeing in the Britney Spears thing?
Well, I don't think Britney was that young. I mean, she was certainly an adult.
Sure.
When the guardianship happened, right. I think it's spread around. Usually, guardianships for younger people are when they have something that falls into the disability area, developmental disabilities.
Sure.
People who have, on the autism spectrum or learning disabilities that are very severe, or autism. And when they get to be over 18, the parents lose that natural guardianship right, and they need to get legal authority. And that's something that can only be done by a court. Now, capacity is an interesting question. You may have a child with a disability who's 24, 25 years of age, who may have a lot of physical damages, physical disabilities, and some capacity issues. But, there's levels of capacity. You can have capacity to do certain tasks, but not others. Capacity is not an on-off switch. So sometimes people come to me and say, our son's developed some psychiatric problems or some medical issues that we didn't know about in his earlier years. I guess we need to be guardian. I say, no, let's have your son evaluated, and we may find that he can make certain basic decisions. Maybe he can appoint you as a parent to be his healthcare agent, because he may understand that he needs assistance with making healthcare decisions, even though he might get a job as a checkout person in a supermarket. That he could do. Maybe he can also do some healthcare deciding. If not, at least he could have the capacity to name you as his healthcare agent. So a lot of planning can be done, and we can't assume that an older person or a person of middle age lacks capacity, because it is not an on-off switch. There are degrees of capacity, and each task that we have to do in life has a different level of capacity necessary to make those decisions. People rush into guardianships far too often when it may not be necessary.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, people wanted to learn more about this. I don't know if you write or do anything. I know that you have practiced law for a long time, and I know that you teach as a professor, adjunct professor of law at the New York Law School. Is there places people can read maybe some of your work or things that you might be doing?
Yes, if people put my name in Google, some articles will come up, some videos. But there are some very good resources. The American Bar Association has something called a Commission on Problems of Aging. They have wonderful materials about guardianships. There are a lot of good materials at state bar associations. We have an elder law and special needs section here in New York of our state bar association. And we have committees on guardianship and financial elder abuse, which is a big problem in America, Ryan. It's something that we could talk about another time. But there are some good materials. I had a book published a number of years ago called The Complete Retirement Survival Guide. I think it's only available now electronically. There are no prints anymore. It's a few years old, but the basics are still there. So, yes, there are some materials. Guardianship is important. But also people need to read about advanced directives and powers of attorney. And on our website, pierrolaw.com, we have a lot of educational materials, webinars on advanced directives and caregiving and government benefits and estate taxes. So, yes, there's a lot out there that are good resources for people, but a lot on the web. You just have to be careful. Not everything on the web is correct. So read more than one article before you make decisions.
Yes, that's very important to point out. As a senior partner, Pierre O'Connor and Strauss, a guardianship expert, Peter Strauss, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight on KMOX.
It's been my pleasure. Have a good evening.
You too. He joins us on the Bommarito Automotive Group guest line. Very fascinating look there. Yes, it's something that it's a whole different world to me. I never considered this sort of thing. I even listen to law programs on podcasts, and you hear about elder law and some of the things that people ask questions on. This has never come up. So to me, it's a whole new world. So it's good that Peter came on and explained it to us, considering it's in the news and you probably had questions too. This is Overnight America, KMOX.